Society is a chain of bonds that we're all stuck with, whether we like it or not, based on blood, whether we want to admit it or not.
Yeah.
And this idea is completely alien to Western governments.
Well, it's literally what liberalism is trying to emancipate us from.
Yes.
I mean, Harry, just a quick thing. You don't get longhoused by your own parents because you're the one with the money.
No, you get henpecked by them. You get nagged by them. You get into two men when you still if you're living with your father, at least in my experience, if you're living with your father past a certain age, you will butt heads.
Sure,
and it will turn into an eternal nightmare.
When you're young,
you will want to cut off your own head.
Well,
and then how
Harry, do you have to that?
And then how are you going to look after them? Because you've cut off your own head.
Just quickly, I think this is a young man's perspective on it.
This was my dad's perspective of my grandfather before he died as well. They did not get along past a certain age.
All right.
I think it's one of those. Get along with your dad fine when you go to visit.
Harry, if you can afford to do the atomisation thing, you can still do it. I'm not making it illegal. All I'm saying is, if we didn't have welfare and pensions,
it would be charity
for a certain amount of people. Yeah, if your parents fall on hard times, well, you can either let them starve in the street or you can bring them in, just like everywhere else in the world.
And don't get me wrong, this is actually the same thing goes the other way for disinheriting your children as well. Yeah. England was one of the rare places in the world where you could actually disinherit your children. Like, it was very, very unusual. But what this meant is that there's a kind of, not a weapon, I don't want to say the word weapon, but there's a way that the people the way that the people who are being depended on can influence the behavior of those who are expecting something from them. Right, and vice versa. So there's actually a negotiation that can happen that has a real effect if it's not just being henpecked.
This is very important, because I think that actually for most of life you can go through it without necessarily saying, I'm going to do exactly this, and no matter what happens in my life, I will follow this script. Actually, I think most of life is working things out with the people that you care about, and for some people it might not work. Living in with you and being dependent, you've got to work that out for yourself. Like I think of my grandparents where they needed like a full-time carer, and we simply weren't in a financial position to be able to do that, and it didn't make financial sense. You earn more money working your current job and you pay the carer to do it. That makes more sense. It doesn't mean that you're abdicating your responsibility. No. In fact,
you're still providing.
Exactly. And if anything, you go out of your way to make sure you're there in person to look after them. And so I think that most people have this view, even though they might not have thought about it. When these problems come up, they'll just try and figure something out between them, which I think is the most reasonable way of doing these sorts of things. Just say
it's the most free. Because the state isn't getting involved saying, give me 40% of your income so that I can take care of somebody else's parents who you've never seen in your life. So there's also this idea of freedom. I mean, today's Wednesday. You've spent Monday and Tuesday working for Keir Starmer and the Quangos, and now you started working for yourself. And the next week, rinse and repeat. So it's coerced charity, which empties it of all nobility and meaning. It's coming at your financial expense, and it's coming at the expense of your own freedom.
Well, and what is germane to this conversation is that it creates an enormous pull factor for immigration. So basically, if we didn't have the welfare system, I don't think that immigration would be an issue, because people would still come here, but we wouldn't care because they would be doing something productive and looking after themselves. So I don't particularly have a problem with immigration. I have a problem with mass immigration, which is buoyed by the welfare state.
Yes, I'm the exact opposite almost. I actually don't have as much of a problem with welfare as long as it's only restricted to natives and isn't as parasitic as it is right now.
Well, do that either. But the pull factor of welfare is clearly what is driving, which has flipped. Because when we were young in the 90s, there was immigration, but it wasn't.
Well, not much.
Yeah, but nobody cared.
Genuinely, there were, okay. So I'm well versed in this. So from the sort of 1960s onwards, there was literally. It was in the tens of thousands into a country of millions, and so you'd hardly notice. But there were periods in the 70s and 80s where it was negative, And so there was actually a net immigration of people from the UK. And in the early 90s, again, it was somewhere about 30, 40,000 were coming a year. And that you just wouldn't notice that. And so it just wasn't evident. Like there might be one foreign kid in your class in your entire school, you know? But
you normally had like a Chinese restaurant or corner shop or something.
Yeah, or his dad served in the military or something like that, right? And that's how I got to know a couple of foreign friends, because their fathers had served in the military, and as mine had. But you're both basically right on this. Like, you can either have an extremely well guarded nativist welfare state that, to be fair, if we were the rich country we used to be, we could probably afford, or you can have a country that has essentially open borders but no welfare state, and those two things would probably work out reasonably well in the long run. But we have the worst of both worlds. We have open borders and a totally accessible welfare state.
If you look at immigration, again, coming at it from a Middle Eastern perspective, I hear a lot of people saying, oh, look, the UAE has complete open borders, and isn't that a wonderful thing? You arrive in the UAE, you enter into debt to pay for your car and to pay for your house, and the car is bought from a dealership that's owned by natives, and the house is built and rented by a company that's owned by natives. And the whole economic cycle is focused on extracting money from migrants rather than giving them money. Whereas here it's sort of the inverse. I mean, the state shouldn't be subsidizing the education of my children because I'm not from here.
To be honest, even if you are from here, it shouldn't.
Fair enough. But at least put that line in the sand.
Yes.
And you go there, if you want to educate, you go to the UAE, you want to educate your children, you pay for it. You want to do whatever you want, you pay for it. You want to get health insurance, you pay for it. It's not on the NHS. It's not on the state's expense. It's not at the expense of the people who are welcoming you. There's something very abrasive about coming into someone's house and demanding that they serve you endlessly and provide you with their own standard of living. As a guest to dinner, yes, fair enough, but that's not it.
The
that's not what's
UAE,
happening.
along with a whole bunch of other countries, they also have an interesting presumption on the criminal code, which is basically if something happens when you're there, let's say there's a traffic accident, if you're the foreigner, you're automatically at fault. And the logic is, well, the accident wouldn't have happened if you weren't there, so therefore it must be your fault, even if somebody drives into the back of you.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
I don't know about that, but there's definitely, you're insta-deported the minute you're involved in a crime.
Yes.
There's sort of, you commit a crime, you serve your sentence, and you're instantly deported. So you have Keir Starmer here saying, oh, now we're going to start deporting rapists. Well, thank you, but what about burglars and murderers? Like, why are we stopping?
No, I agree.
Why
totally
there?
agree.
And there's no expectation of ever receiving citizenship. There's no expectation of ever receiving citizenship. When you're not economically productive, when you're not earning a salary, you leave.
So
work visas. Yeah.
This is a really interesting point that I think is actually really worth some sort of discussion, and it's the question of franchise, right?
Yes.
So if I move to a foreign country, like, you know, I would love to live in Greece because I love the weather, I love the climate, I love the environment, I love the history, right? If they were like, yeah, okay, you can, you know, own a business, earn money, work here, pay taxes, but you'll never be politically enfranchised. So I'd be the equivalent of a metic in ancient Athens.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a fair deal.
Yeah.
Like, why would I think I would be entitled to political power over the Greeks?
Exactly.
With the franchise, let alone be elected to a...
Why did Rishi Sunak think that he was entitled to be the Prime Minister of Britain on the same?
It's just democracy rhetoric, really, isn't it? Where it's been carried too far.
Yes.
And, I mean, the
doctrine of universalism.
My opinion on these sorts of things is that I don't really care. I'm already disenfranchised in politics, so...
But it'd be nice if we weren't.
It would,
I mean,
you know...
Come on. That's not an acceptable
just to our earlier point.
Situation.
Just to our earlier point, this is a map of Europe in the next century, so 2100s.
Natives in Europe, right?
So no, that is the birth. That is zero immigration.
Zero, right? Yeah. So
if
we have
5 years' time,
zero immigration now
from today.
From today,
right.
So that's not deporting the people already here. That's just assuming that they adopt our birth rate practices, and which you said earlier, that's what the populations would end up. Now, I don't have a problem there being 48 million people in the country.
No, I bet it'd be brilliant.
But the welfare system cannot function if there isn't growth.
But also, we're not seeing the demographic breakdowns here. So, I mean, I would be surprised if there were 28 million Italians in Italy, given their birth rates at the moment, right?
Oh, these numbers would be lower if it was zero immigration plus deportations.
Yeah. They'd be a lot lower, probably.
But then would it? Because then housing would fall, and people would be more likely to buy a family home in their 20s and have children.
Or just given by current replacement rates.